If by religion we mean the proper worship of God, then religion is essential to the church, because that's why the church exists. It's for the worship and glory of God and the sanctification of man. The church is not composed of individuals who happen to be believers. The church from the very beginning has been an organized religion. That's why it has joints and bones and so forth, to borrow the St. Paul's metaphors, both from Corinthians, also in Romans 12, and also in the captivity epistles, Ephesians, most notably. It's always been an organized religion. It's not something private. The church is something you belong to, but it's an organization that you belong to. In other words, an organization is part of the transmission itself. Christianity does not start with me and Jesus, and then a bunch of us get together and figure out how we're going to do things. Or me and Jesus and the Bible, and I find people of like mind and organized. That's not the church. The church is a body that can speak to me with authority, because it has inherited the faith from the apostles, and they're going to speak to me with authority. Actually, the original reformers believed that. I would defend that view as being Luther's own view, that the church is an organization that can speak to me with authority. Okay. In fact, Luther's complaint is that exactly what the Pope wasn't doing. The Pope was corrupting the faith, and that's why we need to get some things straight. Well, one man trying to do all that on his own cannot live long enough to get it done, and then the Reformation became something completely that Luther himself would not have recognized. But the church is a body you belong to. It's not just a relationship; it's a whole complex of relationships. It isn't just me and Jesus. I can't do that. I cannot bring my gift to the altar with God until I'm reconciled with my brother. And I can't love a God whom I don't see until I love the brother that I see. Now, there's a whole complex of relationships that got to get straight. Well, it's an organization. So you've got the mandates in the Gospel of Matthew, which is the only one of the Gospels where the word ecclesia, church, is used. Matthew 16 to Matthew 18. It's the only one. Okay? If you're having trouble with your brother, try to settle it between him and you. Well, if you can't do that, bring a couple other people in to help. If that doesn't work, then you bring it to the church. And the church decides. In other words, the church has authority. Jesus is saying that. He gives the church authority. Okay? To you do I give the keys to the kingdom of heaven. Whatsoever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven. Whatsoever you loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. Okay? A church that cannot speak to me with authority is not adequate for me, because the church, as I see in the New Testament, is the church that speaks with authority. And it's the authority that precedes the writing of the Scriptures themselves. It's the authority that's already there. It's the authority we see being exercised by Paul when he wrote it. Now, the epistles and Gospels that we received were tied to certain needs. There's no reason why I should suspect that absolutely everything I would need would be in those books. There's no reason I should suspect that. In other words, the apostles didn't get together and say, what are the essentials of the faith? Now let's put them down. They didn't do that. They simply left us epistles, and then gradually, one by one, they died, usually as martyrs. So what we're left with are these bishops who have inherited their authority from the apostles. They've got the writings from the apostles, and they've got to make the best of it. And what I'm saying is they got it right. And if they didn't get it right, then I don't know what in the world we do, because then we're on our own. So the transmitted faith, the transmitted understanding of the Scriptures, for me, is essential to the Christian life itself. And the definitive encapsulation of that is in the Creed. But notice the Creed only deals with God and Jesus and the Holy Spirit. We don't expect everything to be included in a creed. No. The creed is a structural outline. And that's why when the bishops met again in 431, the Council of Ephesus, they were dealing with Nestorius, because Nestorius is the one who said that Jesus was two people. He was Jesus and he was Christ, a man and the Son of God. And the church met and condemned Nestorius, but they did not lay a finger on the creed. So from that point on, there was just an understanding that even though there were ecumenical councils, they had no authority to change the creed. I regard every religion as idolatrous, which doesn't worship the God in the Bible. I do not include the Jews in that, because we worship the same God as the Jews. In other words, I believe the Jews have received a valid revelation. I believe they didn't get the whole picture because of. But I don't. I believe with Romans 11 that we are engrafted into that. So I put the Jews in a special category. I won't try to describe the category right now. But I believe that the God who revealed himself to Muhammad, to the extent that he rejects the divinity of Jesus, fits the category of the Antichrist as described in 1 John. I won't say it's the Antichrist. It's the closest I can think of an historical example where that criterion, whoever denies that the eternal Son has come in the flesh, whoever denies that, John calls that the Antichrist. That's the closest thing I can think of. I don't want to work that out. But I believe, therefore, Muhammad was a false prophet and deceived. I do not worship the same God the Muslims do. That doesn't mean that God can't use Islam. It doesn't mean that at all. I give God credit for being able to do all kinds of things that beyond. I believe in God who brings good out of evil. I believe in God, the God who managed to save his people through having the patriarchs sell their little brother into slavery. I believe in God who's operative even in these other religions. If I have any other God besides the one who's revealed himself, it's idolatry. And I believe a great deal of contemporary culture, particularly the breakdown of the family, the denial of patriarchy and so forth, it seems to me is rooted in unbelief. But one day I was sitting across the table with the wife of one of my classmates from our high school class that began in 1952. Give you some idea how far back that goes. And she was explaining to me, she said, Pat, what we really need to do, we really need to get rid of this whole picture of God as Father, because that's the source of all our problems. And I said, I don't think you're a very good Roman Catholic. On the other hand, who am I to say? But I said, if you get rid of God as Father, the first casualty is you also lose Jesus. And you're on your own, and you got to figure it out on your own. Okay? Do you really want to return to everybody figuring out who God is on their own, on the basis of your own political biases, on the basis of your own hang-ups with dear old dad? You're going to create a theology on your own. Well, have at it, but that's not the Christian faith anymore. You know? What we're asking is the Christian faith still viable? Well, I'm quite sure it is. Quite sure it is. These other things, I believe, are the inventions of an hour, and they will disappear. There's nothing more natural to the structure of humanity than patriarchy. If you just let it, there's a book called The Inevitability of Patriarchy, and I believe that completely. Here's how I regard patriarchy. First principle, the principle of patriarchy. Husbands, love your wives as Christ loves the church. If husbands love their wives as Christ loves the church, that's the secret to patriarchy. Do not require a woman to respect a man who doesn't love her. That's slavery. If a wife must respect somebody who's cruel to her, cold to her, disrespectful to her, insensitive to her, I can't expect her to respect. That's no longer marriage. That's a form of slavery. The real enemies of the family right now is not patriarchy. I think the real enemy of the family is pornography, where people have a private sex life. From age 14, have a private sex life. I have been hearing confessions since the summer of 1965. I've been hearing confessions, and I've noticed the difference. The computer, the phone. People have an advanced sex life without another member of the sex, and without any commitment of any kind. Where sex is simply part of the gratification of the body is the body is an instrument of a good time. So they're experiencing sex in purely selfish ways, self-centered ways, frustrated ways. So sex is no longer a way of giving myself to another human being. And that's terrible. That will destroy a family. The sad thing is that people get involved in this and then later on try to get married, but they're still carrying on what is essentially a selfish life. So I believe the proper path should be, we should not change our creed or change our belief to accommodate it to what is essentially a sinful situation, any form of slavery to one's passions. The great threat to humanity is what has always been the world, the flesh, and the devil. That's what it's always been. That's why it's a certain ascetical dimension has all been part of the Christian life. I beat my body, says Paul, and bring it into subjection. I keep control over myself. With regard to headship in the family, yeah, I'm the head of my household. big deal. I'm not the tyrant of my household. With me. And I would never made any decisions, ever, that my wife wasn't on board with. My chief counselor for all my life long, and this December will be our 50th anniversary, so we've been together, and we got married in the mid-30s. I would never have done anything without the counsel of my wife. I would never done anything against the counsel of my wife. Guided in all ways. I think of the husband, okay, as the prow of the ship. He's leading the ship out into the ocean. He's leading his family, okay. Every ship I've ever seen has been steered from the back. With me. The name on my door, if I have a name on my door, is my name. I'm Pat Reardon. I represent this family. Behind that door, I'm subject to a queen. Every home in this world is an extension of a woman's body, because our first home in this world is a woman's body. So the home becomes an extension of the woman, which is why the word for home is feminine, domus. The Latin word, domus. The home is the extension of the woman's body. So she's the hearth of the house. The question of women priests, I believe that the reason we would never ordain women to the priesthood is simply because it's never been done and would not have been done. Something that the church had the option of doing and always refused to do. I mean, at the time of the Greco-Roman Empire, when half the priests in the Mediterranean basin were women, the Christian church said, we're not going that route. We're not going that route. There's a headship within the church, and it's a table headship. Where you get that very explicitly the first time is in Ignatius of Antioch, who describes the bishop at the altar, describes the bishop at the altar as representing God the Father. And that's a very, very deep image. It's not asserted in the creed, but it's so deep in the Christian historical memory. What would justify ever departing from that? I can't think of any reason to depart from that. That's why I don't believe it can be done, because it's never been done. In fact, and the opportunities to do it, the church has rejected the idea out of hand. You had an attempt at women priesthood, for example, among the Montanists in the 2nd century. They had female clergy. Well, they were gone within half a century. They disappeared. The Catholics never did that. What the church has always said and believed with regard to structure or regard to doctrine is what we receive from the apostles. That practice was rejected by the apostles. They only ordained men. At the Last Supper, they're only men. And the women were certainly prominent in the church. In fact, they're better believers and certainly better organized than the men were. But Jesus only picked men. There's something about the role of the priesthood and the authority of the priesthood that is intrinsically not just masculine but male. So although it's not contained I don't think it's even implied in the creed, is in the tradition of the church, which gives us the creed. The tradition of the church, which gives us the canon of the scriptures. That's the only way we know what the canon of the scriptures is, through the tradition of the church.